My sister-in-law claimed she was too sick to work and moved onto our couch until I saw her live streaming from my guest bedroom. They say family takes care of family, but there is a very fine line between offering a helping hand and letting someone completely dismantle the boundaries of your home. For 3 months, my husband's younger sister, Chloe, lived in our house as a tragic figure. According to her, she had been struck down by a sudden, mysterious, and debilitating chronic fatigue condition that made it impossible for her to keep her corporate marketing job or pay her apartment rent. She moved onto our living room couch with 3 suitcases, looking pale, exhausted, and completely defeated by life. Out of deep love for his sister, my husband, Mark, insisted we support her completely, even when her presence began to strain our finances and our sanity. I cooked her meals, washed her laundry, and kept our household completely quiet so she could rest. But a sudden technical glitch with our home Wi-Fi network forced me to investigate our guest bedroom on a Thursday afternoon, uncovering a high-stakes, highly lucrative digital deception that turned our charitable home into a stage for her secret life. When Chloe first arrived at our front door, she looked like a ghost of her former self. She was 26, usually vibrant and incredibly sharp, but she claimed the stress of her environment had triggered a severe, unresolvable burnout that left her physically weak. Mark was devastated seeing his little sister in that condition. He reminded me of how their parents had passed away early and how they only had each other to rely on in times of crisis. I entirely understood his perspective, so I welcomed her into our home with open arms, transitioning our lives to accommodate her recovery. Because our small guest bedroom was initially being used as my home office for my freelance graphic design business, Chloe slept on our main living room sofa for the first few weeks, while she allegedly looked for remote, low-stress work that she could manage from her phone. As the weeks rolled into months, Chloe's condition seemed to fluctuate in a very specific pattern. Whenever Mark and I were home in the evenings, she was virtually catatonic on the couch, wrapped in a heavy blanket, barely able to lift her head to speak. She would whisper her gratitude, complaining of severe brain fog and migraines, claiming that even the light from the television made her dizzy. I felt immense sympathy for her, to the point where I voluntarily moved all of my design equipment, my dual monitors, and my high-speed setup out of the guest office and into a cramped corner of our master bedroom, so Chloe could have a private, quiet space to heal. We bought her specialty groceries, paid for her premium streaming subscriptions, and Mark even started dipping into our personal savings to cover her minimal credit card bills so she wouldn't face financial ruin while she was incapacitated. But despite her apparent physical collapse, I began to notice a series of strange inconsistencies around the house during the daytime. Because I worked from home as a freelancer, I was in the house constantly while Mark was away at his corporate insurance job. During the day, while she was supposed to be resting behind the closed door of the guest bedroom, I would occasionally hear a distinct, highly energetic tone of voice echoing through the drywall. It didn't sound like a sick person whispering on a phone call. It sounded like a professional presenter, full of enthusiasm, laughter, and high-velocity energy. Whenever I would knock on the door to bring her lunch or check on her, the noise would instantly vanish, followed by a long pause before Chloe would weakly open the door, squinting at the hallway light, claiming she had just been trying to practice vocal exercises to combat her depression. I wanted so badly to believe her that I ignored my initial instincts, attributing the noises to my own imagination or the sound leakage from her headphones. The entire house of cards collapsed on a hot Thursday afternoon. I was in the middle of a high-priority live client presentation via video call in my bedroom corner when our entire home internet connection suddenly slowed down to an absolute crawl. My client's face pixelated, the audio began to chop severely, and a notification popped up on my screen stating that our network bandwidth was being entirely consumed by an immense, high-definition upload stream on the same network. This was a massive issue for my business, as I paid for the highest tier of residential fiber optic internet, specifically to avoid upload delays. Knowing that Mark was at his office and I wasn't downloading anything, the source of the massive data drain had to be coming from the guest bedroom. I opened my network administration app on my phone to check the connected devices, expecting to find that Chloe had accidentally left an automated cloud backup running on her phone. Instead, the router portal showed that a brand new, unnamed high-end laptop device plugged directly into the guest room's hidden Ethernet port was aggressively consuming over 80% of our total network upload capacity. What struck me as entirely bizarre was the destination of the traffic. It was routing directly to a premium, live streaming broadcaster platform used by professional content creators and digital influencers. Confused and increasingly suspicious, I downloaded the corresponding streaming application on my phone, set up a quick anonymous viewer account, and searched for live broadcasts originating from our specific suburban zip code area. Within seconds, a thumbnail popped up on my screen that made my breath catch completely in my throat. It was a live video feed of our own guest bedroom, but it had been completely transformed. The beige walls were covered by a sleek, temporary neon-lit backdrop. A professional ring light was illuminating the space, and sitting in front of a top-tier studio microphone was my supposedly bedridden sister-in-law, Chloe. She wasn't wearing her oversized sweatpants or looking pale. She was wearing an immaculate, expensive designer outfit full makeup, and an incredibly bright, energetic smile. I put my headphones in, my heart pounding violently against my ribs as I listened to her speak to an audience of over 4,000 active live viewers. She was running a highly successful daily lifestyle and business motivation stream under a pseudonym, actively teaching her followers how to optimize their digital monetization and scale their personal brands online. But the real betrayal came when a viewer asked her a question in the live chat about how she managed her daily overhead costs while building her media empire. Chloe laughed into the microphone, a sharp, arrogant sound that I had never heard from her before. She told her audience that the secret to maximizing profit margins early in your career is minimizing personal liabilities. She looked directly into the camera and said that she had engineered a genius arrangement where she convinced her overprotective, guilty older brother that she was too chronically ill to work a standard job. She openly bragged to thousands of strangers that she was living completely rent-free, getting free organic meals, and using her sister-in-law's private office space as a zero-cost production studio, while she quietly accumulated thousands of dollars a month in subscriber donations and corporate brand sponsorships directly into a private business bank account. A wave of pure, unadulterated fury washed over me. While my husband was working overtime shifts to cover her bills and I was tiptoeing around our own home to protect her supposed migraines, she was using our charity as a hilarious punchline to build her online clout. I stood up from my desk, walked down the hallway, and stood directly outside the guest bedroom door. I could hear her voice booming through the wood, thanking a viewer for a $100 digital tip. Without knocking, I turned the brass doorknob and pushed the door wide open. The look of absolute terror that crossed Chloe's face when she saw me standing in the doorway was worth every single dollar we had spent on her. She instantly tried to cover the camera lens with her hand, muttering a panicked excuse to her audience about a sudden technical disruption, but it was far too late. I walked directly into the center of the room, looking at the hidden studio setup, the expensive camera, and the bags of high-end clothing hidden away in the closet that she had evidently been ordering online while we thought she was broke. I looked her dead in the eye and told her she had exactly until 5 o'clock when her brother got home to pack every single piece of her multi-thousand-dollar studio equipment and leave our property. Chloe didn't cry. Instead, seeing that her digital empire had been completely exposed, her frail victim persona vanished into thin air, replaced by a cold, transactional arrogance. She stood up from her ergonomic chair, adjusted her designer top, and told me that I wouldn't dare tell Mark. She claimed that Mark would always choose his blood over a suspicious wife, and that if I tried to kick her out, she would simply tell him that my constant hostility and jealousy of her online success was making her physical relapse worse. She looked at me with a smirk and said that Mark would believe whatever story she decided to write for him. She severely underestimated the power of digital evidence. Instead of arguing with her, I pulled out my phone, unlocked my screen recording of her live broadcast, where she explicitly admitted to manipulating her brother's guilt, and hit play. As her own voice filled the quiet room, bragging about how easy it was to exploit our household, the smirk completely died on her face. Her complexion turned a genuine, pale shade of white as she realized her own mouth had created an unwinnable case against her. I left the room without saying another word and waited in the living room until Mark's truck pulled into the driveway after his shift. When he walked through the door, tired and carrying a bag of specialized medication he had bought for her on the way home, I sat him down at the kitchen table. I didn't yell, and I didn't lecture him about his family loyalty. I simply handed him my phone and let him watch his sister's live stream admission in its entirety. I watched his face transition from absolute confusion to a profound, heart-wrenching realization of how his grief and love for his sister had been systematically weaponized against him. The confrontation that followed was swift and completely absolute. Mark walked into the guest bedroom, bypassed all of Chloe's frantic, crying excuses about how the video was taken out of context, and personally helped her carry her suitcases out to the driveway. There were no shouting matches or dramatic scenes. There was only the quiet, heavy reality of a broken boundary. Chloe called an Uber, loaded her expensive studio gear into the trunk, and left our neighborhood that same evening. We changed the home network passwords, reinstalled my graphic design equipment back into my rightful office space, and closed that chapter of deception for good. It was an incredibly harsh, expensive lesson in domestic boundaries, but it proved that the truth always finds a way to stream clearly, no matter how thick of a mask someone tries to wear.